Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. You are welcome to this webinar this morning. And I would like to introduce myself. Today, I will be the moderator of the program. I will be assisted by my colleague, Dr. Joseph Semakula. Dr. Semakula, can you raise your hand wherever you are? Yes, that is Dr. Semakula. He will be helping me as a moderator. Before we go into the webinar itself, we would like to commit this day and the webinar to the Lord. And I would like to make a humble request to our Vice Chancellor to give us a short prayer that will usher us into the program. Our Vice Chancellor, sir, kindly give us a short prayer to usher us into today's program. I thank you.
Thank you very much. May we humble ourselves to raise the voice of prayer to God. I would like to take a verse from the Holy Scriptures, from the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 28. And God blessed man and woman and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. In that spirit, Lord God, you have given us a responsibility to take care of the earth and all the created things. May we, as we begin this webinar, respect the command that you gave to us to take care and to be mindful of the sanctity of your creation. The agroecological practices may help us to be friendly to the environment and to make everybody love the earth, because it is the place where you have put us. May this webinar be successful, and may the moderator be guided and all the participants to keep focused on the objective of this webinar, and that we may achieve the objectives. We make this prayer through Christ our Lord.
Amen. Thank you very much, Professor, Father. That was a very wonderful prayer. And as we have already invited the Lord into the house, I'm sure everything else is going to move on very well. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow participants and speakers, once again, I would like to welcome you to this webinar. Once again, my name is Professor Julius Mwine, and I'll be taking you through the program of the day. The theme for today, as you may have read in several adverts, is fostering agroecological practices in the new normal for the recovery of sustainable agriculture. And we are going to look at the role of different actors within the value chain. COVID has affected all of us differently. It has affected the way of life, the way we carry out our agriculture, the way we live, the way we eat, even the way we stay at home. It has affected all young and old, the rich and the poor, the mighty and the low. And as human beings, we cannot just sit there and say, let it be. So what we have to do and what the world is doing is to look at possibilities of overcoming COVID-19. And in the area of agriculture, quite a lot is happening. And therefore, it is no wonder that we believers in sustainable agriculture should also look at what can be done in order to overcome or in order to resist it, to negate, or to try and withstand the effects of COVID-19 as far as putting food on our table is concerned. It is one old wise man who said, and this is Gandhi, that powerful Indian, who said that if something affects your stomach, then it affects the whole being. And therefore, we cannot allow COVID to affect our stomachs because the whole being will be affected. Therefore, today, ladies and gentlemen, as humans of insight, we are going to look at how agroecology is helping or will help to withstand the effects of COVID-19 as far as putting food on our table is concerned. This webinar has been organized in a series, and we shall have 3 series. The first one is today's one, which is about production, and we shall also be looking at what service providers can do, the farmers and the service providers. The next webinar will be on the 9th of September, and this one will be in the middle part of the value chain, and it will be about training and research. We want to see what people of research are doing, what innovations have come up, such that these innovations can be taken up by our farmers in order to withstand the effects of COVID. And lastly, we shall have the last bit of the value chain, and that is processing and marketing, but also not forgetting we the consumers. We the consumers must also do something. The marketeers are doing their thing, the processors need to do their thing, and we at the top of it, of the web chain, we also need to think of what is possible in order to oppose or negate the effects of COVID-19. So those will be our webinar series, and I invite you to attend all of them because they are all very, very interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to spend a lot of your time. I would like to take you to today's program, which we shall utilize. It's quite a short program. And in this program today, which I expect to be screened, I believe all of you can read it on the screen. The program started at 10 o'clock, and this is exactly, the item is about to end, where the convener or the modulator just introduces what we are going to go through. And the next item on the agenda will have a welcome note, a welcome remark from our Vice Chancellor, Professor John Chrysostom Maviri. He's already with us. You are welcome, Father. Between 10:30 and 11, we shall have a keynote address, and this will be given by no other than our friend, Dr. Wire Kakulu. Dr. Wire Kakulu works for FAO, and today he's representing the country representative of FAO in Uganda. I see him logged in. You are very welcome, Dr. Kakulu. We are waiting to listen to you. Between 11 and 12 o'clock, we shall have our farmers speaking to us. We have planned 4 farmers from East African countries. And this will be, we shall have a Ugandan, we shall have a Kenyan, we shall have a Tanzanian, and someone from Rwanda. The truth is that we would have loved to have as many countries as possible, but the time is not on our side. So we shall hear from these farmers, and they tell us what they are actually doing to overcome the effects of COVID. Between 12 and 12:30, we shall have our discussants. 3 discussants will join us and put the science into what the farmers are talking about. I'm glad some of these discussants are farmers, others are lecturers, others are civil society from the civil society organization, and therefore they will be discussing what our farmers would have talked about. And when time comes, I will introduce these discussants. So between 12:30 and 12:50, we shall have a QA question and answer session, and then of course reactions. And we shall request all the panelists to be around such that they can answer all the questions that you will have raised. Ladies and gentlemen, the questions could be sent as a message, but you can also raise your hand when time comes such that you can ask your question. And lastly, between 12:50 and 1, we shall have closing remarks and closure, and we shall request our Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic to close the session. So our program will be as short as that. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like to request that we try to keep time so that we have a short but interesting program. That is all about the program, ladies and gentlemen. And right now, I would like to make a humble request to our Vice Chancellor to give us a welcome remark. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chancellor. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Moderator, Professor Julius. I take this opportunity to welcome the participants to this webinar, especially the presenters, the panelists and discussants. I congratulate the host, ACALISE, which is hosted here at Uganda Matters University. Thank you for taking advantage of the prevailing new normal to organize and host this webinar, which focuses on the production segment, the farmers and input providers. This is like a curtain raiser, I would imagine, in the trajectory of the value chain, synergetic effort of different players and actors. I am sure after the second and third webinar, as you have introduced, the main objective of a systemic and systematic procedure for a resilient and adaptive agroecological sustainable agriculture in Africa will have been achieved. Uganda Matters University is proud to associate herself with the agroecological practices for a sustainable agriculture, especially for smallholder farmers. Some of the recommendations for keeping safe in this period of the COVID-19 pandemic is to have good diet and nutritious diet to fight the virus in case of infection. In fact, it is said that 80% of those who have been infected by this virus may need not go to hospital if they have a good diet and they can keep a good nutrition. This can fight off the virus and may not need to go to hospital. There is no better food than the organic products as promoted by the agroecologists. I would like to wish the participants in this webinar a very successful interaction, and this should have impact on many, many people who are interested in the preservation of Mother Nature so that nature also keeps us safe. For God and my country. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chancellor, for the welcome remark. It's a blessing to have you, and we from the Center of Excellence and Uganda Matters University, we are very proud of you. Ladies and gentlemen, as I introduced in the program, our next speaker is Dr. William Kakulu from FAO, Uganda, and he's going to be giving us the keynote address. Before Dr. Kakulu speaks, allow me to say something little about Dr. Kakulu. Dr. Kakulu is a consultant with the FAO, Uganda, that is Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations in Uganda. And as the National Adaptation Plan Coordinator for Uganda, he has spearheaded implementation of FAO and UNDP Uganda, Uganda components under the program for integrating agricultural sectors in the national adaptation plans. He promoted partnerships on climate change adaptation, planning and resilience, and built capacity for government and non-state actors, including officers from central and local governments and National Assembly parliamentarians on gender-responsive climate change adaptation planning, budgeting and policy marketing, which include youth involvement. Dr. Kakulu has done quite a lot for FAO and many other organizations. Before working for FAO, he was a technical advisor for IUCN and IDRC, a country program coordinator for World Agroforestry Center, and also worked with the Uganda National Wetlands Program and forestry sector. As a consultant, he has accomplished a number of assignments with institutions such as the World Bank, the FAO, UNDP, IUCN, WWF, African Forest Forum, Africa Development Bank, East African Community, National Nile Basin Initiative, ACERECA, and many other organizations. Dr. Kakulu holds a PhD and a Master of Science in Environment and Natural Resource Management, and a Bachelor's in Finance. He brings in an experience of 29 years in working in those related environments. Dr. Kakulu, we are glad to have you, and we thank you for joining us and giving us your time. And you are now welcome to give us your keynote address. Over to you, Dr. Kakulu.
Thank you so much, moderator, for the kind words of introduction. I hope you can hear me.
We can't hear you.
I hope you can hear me now. Thank you so much, moderator.
We cannot hear you, Dr. Kakuru. Maybe you unmute.
Yes, thank you. I'm gonna do it now. Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. Can you unmute me? Hello?
We can hear you now.
You can hear me, that's great.
Yes, thank you. Can hear you.
Very good. So, can we continue now? If you can hear me, that's great. I would like to...
Please
Can
continue.
you see my screen now?
Please continue.
Can you see my screen with PowerPoint?
Yes, we can hear you. We can see you.
Very good. And the screen with the PowerPoint. Hello?
Hello?
I hope you can see me with the screen. I hope you can see me on the PowerPoint. Hello?
No, the PowerPoint cannot be seen.
Okay, let me share the screen now afresh. Thank you.
Yes, please.
One, I'd like to thank you for inviting me. And I want to repeat that I'm here to represent the Office of the Food and Agriculture Organization in Uganda. And I'll be bringing in experiences on what FAO has done as an institution that works in different countries, and Uganda being one of them. Can you see my screen now?
Yes,
Hello?
please. Thank you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Very good, thank you. So I bring greetings from our country representative, Dr. Antonio Carrido, who was caught up with another commitment and delegated to me. My responsibility, I'm a climate change consultant at FAO Uganda, and I'll be sharing with you experiences on FAO, how we view agroecology, its elements, and most importantly, how it contributes to food and nutrition security and the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. I'll share with you briefly the role of agroecology during and after disasters and pandemics, including COVID-19, floods, and the desert locusts. And I'll talk about the trends that happened with an example of Uganda, after which I'll tell you what FAO has done in respect to response to COVID-19, and tell you the priorities that we are proposing we should come out with, and lessons we have captured, and bring out the policy proposals. By way of definition, agroecology has already been defined by our moderator and our vice chancellor as an integrated approach which brings ecological and social concepts and principles for management of food and agricultural systems, and brings together different experiences and expertise in the scientific discipline with different principles and practices. And we always prefer to refer to it as a movement that seeks new ways of considering agriculture and its relationships with society. And with reference to the current challenges of climate change, we feel that agroecology comes in handy to give healthy food systems, and we feel it's worth promoting by all of us. I'll share with you quick practices to tell people that what we are talking of agroecology are a number of practices which farmers have done and which extensionists have promoted, and which we feel do not only give you healthy diets, but rather gives you increased productivity, caring for the environment. Examples are one, conservation tillage, where we are saying we can grow crops with minimum tillage and with disruptions of soil structure. The second one, which I think most farmers have practiced, is mixing different crops on a single plot, and you end up with different benefits of complementarities, improving nutrients, and efficiency. A third common one is crop rotation, where nutrients are conserved from one season to the other, and you find helps fight the pests and diseases. Other common one, which we have set up under our cropping systems, cover crops and mulching, which reduces erosion and gives nutrients and enhances soil productivity. Most of us, at least in Africa, have crop livestock integration, which is good. And now we are looking at integrating it with fish farming or aquaculture. We have had aspects of integrated nutrient management, where all of us know that rather than wasting some of the solid material that come from our kitchens and our household, if you sort them, they can come as compost or organic manure and help fix different nutrients in the soil. Another common one is the biological management of pests and diseases in the best way, which we call integrated pest management. Rather than pumping in chemicals that spoil the water, spoil our lives. Common one to manage water is efficient water harvesting. There is manipulation of vegetation structures. There is growing trees on farm, what they refer to as agroforestry, that helps protect the loss of the soil and improves the fertility of the soil. Use of local resources and renewable energy sources, which we need for different purposes. And I'm summarizing those practices with the holistic landscape management, appreciating that where we do our farming is interconnected with different systems, water, and other systems. So based on that, I'm saying that as we respond to God's call, which the Vice Chancellor told us, of managing nature, of producing food, we need to do it the right way. And the right way we're advocating for is agroecology is one of the right ways I'm proposing because of the different elements. And I'm giving quickly 10 which show that agroecology promotes diversity, promotes co-creation and sharing of knowledge, promotes efficiency and recycling of nutrients, promotes resilience of the farmers and ecosystems. It promotes human and social values, culture and food traditions. I'm happy the VC talked about if we are to respond to COVID, we need food, but we have to do it in a sustainable way. It promotes responsible governance, and then it makes you earn the money that you would have earned with solidarity of the economy. Yes, we are saying we want food production, we want increased food production and incomes from food, but we are saying that agroecology is good because if you compare it with the commercial agriculture where we pump in agrochemicals, don't care about ecosystems, we are advocating for it because it increases the ecological resilience, it improves health and nutrition, it helps conserve biodiversity and natural resources, it improves economic stability, and most of all, with the current monster of climate change, agroecology helps to adapt to and mitigate effects of climate change. So I want first drum for it as we come on and say what happened. And I say all of it to respond to a healthy diet as we look at a challenging situation. We appreciate agroecology because it contributes food and nutrition security with greater food quantity, greater food quality, and providing food as medicine and can grow medicinal plants or products along the food. So with all that summary about the background of agroecology, I say that we appreciate it because of its four principles of promoting ecological stability, building on good agronomic practices, being easily accessible to most vulnerable communities and most people interested in farming, and then being brought in a way where it can be owned and driven by farming communities through demonstrations of farmers learning from other farmers. And at Global Thoughts, let people not say it doesn't give you what you want. We believe agroecology indeed contributes to the sustainable development goals with key aspects or key goals of one, improving poverty, or goal number one of no poverty, and goal number two, of target to zero hunger. And along that, agroecology considers other aspects that are in the other 17 goals, including the gender equality, water considerations, climate action, and life, looking at where you're doing farming, life on that land and water being kept clean, and can be done with partnership. And we feel that by doing that, we are contributing global development. And what we read, when we read about the African Union Agenda 2063, the kind of prosperous Africa we want, agroecology could be one of the vehicles that can bring us that. Back to our story of now, what is happening with agriculture and the current situation. I'd like us to say, yes, over the last short period, if you reflect about 2-3 years ago, we have had challenges in the way we do agriculture. We have had challenges in our lifestyle, and most challengingly, the current COVID-19 pandemic. I wanted to quickly show what has happened in Africa, maybe sub-Saharan Africa. You remember that within the beginning part of 2018, we had lots of floods in a number of parts of the African continent, and nearly 500 people lost their lives. As if that was not enough, the second half of 2018 again saw us get another disease referred to as the Rift Valley fever, with a big outbreak in Kenya and Uganda, which made big losses, again, in the livestock sector. Within 2018 and 2019, we had some prolonged droughts in different parts of Africa. And 2019 to 2020, as if that was not enough, when the rains came, they came in a hostile way, and we had floods and landslides with 2 consecutive seasons of rainfall in most of Africa, exceeding averages we have had for many years. Above all that, we had another challenge of the desert locusts, mainly starting within Somalia and Ethiopia, later on spread to Kenya, and currently we have it coming close within Uganda, which was one of the worst invasions recorded over the last 25 years, or even 70 years in some countries. As if that was not enough of the different multiple disasters, 2020 comes in now with the COVID-19, which is a global pandemic, which has had severe economic slowdown, widespread disruption to livelihood, markets, and trade that somehow affects the topic we came to discuss, agroecology. And I would like to bring out experiences on FAO's participation to respond to that challenge and the other multiple disasters. I talked about the multiple disasters of floods, landslides, locusts, and most challengingly now what we are in right now, COVID-19. I'll be sharing with you how it came in and how it has affected agriculture and food systems, and some proposals on how we can have life, depending on whether we live or whether some people lose some people, but life has to go on, how we can sustain that. If I used the practical country, we're in Uganda as one of the countries in Africa. We had trends from 21st of March is when we had the serious alarm bells, when we had about 14 people, Ugandans and some Ugandan residents from out, confirmed cases. Government had no choice but to put some actions, some measures. For example, public transport was closed. There was no food sales in some markets, and some are affecting what you are advocating to or advocating for in food production. Some weeks later, by 4th April, we had more confirmed cases, 33 from 14, 33, which forced government again to have a lockdown, including stopping private cars from moving, shopping malls closed, and that affected the food and agricultural systems. Some weeks later, 18th April, we had more cases confirmed, 55 by that time, which forced government again for more measures to lock down extend that lockdown for another 21 days, meaning now more hampering of agriculture and food systems. Some weeks later, by 2nd May, we had from 55, 97 cases confirmed, and government had no choice but to guide us. Thanks to the government and the different policy implementers and developers, we had no choice but to have the lockdown extended again for another 14 days, affecting agricultural systems. From 97 to 48, I hope you are seeing the graph, we had 248 cases. Government had no choice but to extend the lockdown for another 14 days, but with some restrictions eased, but still having a constraint on food production. Some weeks later, now we are in May, 253 cases confirmed. Lockdown had to be extended for some restrictions, and private transportation was allowed, but with restrictions. So down the journey, I'm bringing up 13th June, that's when the lockdown was eased slightly more, but still with challenges on border districts. Remember, I'm talking of restrictions in the country, but all that time, the airports were closed, exports were not taking place, imports were difficult, either within Africa or from outside Africa, challenging the agriculture and food systems. So I'd like to quickly share with you in bullet points how that affected the agricultural value chain and different actors and the benefits they were getting. If you look at right from the starting point, which we call upstream, where we get inputs for agriculture, the production system, where we practice different agricultural, agronomic, and other practices, the cleaning and grading and harvesting of food systems, processing and packaging them, and trading them. All that was affected by those challenges. I want to give some examples on how that response and measures unavoided affected farming activities and other value chain, value chain from right from the seed, planting the seed to harvesting. Global, of course, thank God, agriculture was considered in most countries as one of the essential activities, and farmers went on with some level of farming, though it was constrained, of course, in different ways of getting inputs and labor and churning out whatever comes out. However, each of the components along the value chain, from production to marketing, harvest marketing, was affected in one way or the other. For example, on the farming activity, there were bottlenecks, for example, in terms of having farmers access inputs in terms of fertilizers, quality seeds, and agrochemicals. Because it was not easy to travel, it was not easy, some shops were closed. The closure of shops and restaurants and schools meant that you are now blocking one of the consumers of what we are yearning for in agriculture. So the agricultural products markets was somehow curtailed, with great impacts, of course, on the sector. Farmers are farming, yes, but the part of the consumption is blocked. And where we are having a good entry point of export, of course, the export markets were locked because there was no air travel, the borders were closed or cut off. And one sector which we are trying to bring up, the ornamental sector, of course, now we had no functions which use those flowers, ornamentals, either here or in other countries. So you find instances where farmers reported that they had to harvest and throw away the flowers and ornamentals. I wanted to go back to this important person who starts that value chain, the farmer and farmer level impacts. Farmers in most of farming, especially in Africa and Asia, they work in groups where they share experience and knowledge, but now group labor was constrained because people couldn't work well, and even where they met, there was issue of social distancing. It was difficult to hire labor because you couldn't easily access people and people couldn't travel. Given that the inputs shops were closed and traveling was difficult, the cost of inputs, especially seeds, fertilizers, farm tools, had increased. And this was such a big challenge now at the upstream part of the production. As a result of those closures also, many farmers lost their most important institutional buyers. I talked of schools and other hotels and others. And most produce had to go to probably the lowest price. I think this was the cheapest period when bananas in Uganda, for example, as one of the key crops, came to the lowest price in just give out price, because hotels, schools were closed. Then restrictions on big meetings also, and not having functions like weddings or hotels or bars or restaurants led to loss of major markets for farm produce. And challenging also, farmers normally plan based on some information they gather or that are is given by extension. The market surveys couldn't be carried out, so it was more speculation and there was no chance of bargaining for good prices. So all that affected agriculture and food system, affecting by COVID-19. Of course, in the background, I'll keep reminding you that I mentioned there were other multiple disasters. In some areas, they are saying locusts now are coming in big swarms in Sudan, I mean, in Ethiopia, in Somalia, in Kenya, coming to Uganda. The farmer is there just not at ease. But then COVID is coming in, not saying even the farmer may die. So at farm level, there are more disruptions in terms of input supply, labor availability, and extension services. And this led to challenges, which I mentioned, of not having inputs, not having extension advisory services, and even for livestock, it was not easy for people to move the livestock uninterrupted. In terms of the other downstream part of the agri-food value chain, there were interruptions in terms of logistics, processing, and marketing in different ways, and the countrywide lockdown measures, including reduced access to markets, resulted ultimately in income aspects where people had to lose jobs. People are negatively affected in terms of the income they were earning from agriculture. The purchasing power of people was low, again now affecting the producer, and everything was in limbo, widening the poverty gap, widening and making the farmers desperate. I'd like again to reflect more on the effects of lockdown measures on the food supply chains and market functioning, including the interruption of farm supply inputs, which I mentioned because of travel restrictions, especially public transport, disruption of food distribution in urban areas, having challenges that items which had limited shelf life couldn't easily be taken because transport was not easy. And even where we had those with longer shelf life, it was not easy because there were increases in prices because people had to resort now to define shelf life items. Challengingly, this happened along the crop farming, livestock farming, and fish farming sectors, and ultimately we had reduced food safety and quality due to the delays and controls on the checks. So one would say, what do we do now? Because reality is COVID has many unknowns. COVID-19 has many unknowns. We don't know when it will end. One would ask an institution like FAO, which is the mandated institution in food systems in the UN, what do we do? And I would like to share with you some policy and programmatic responses which are proposed by FAO and other development partners and governments that can help mitigate impacts of COVID response. For example, policy recommendations. One, we should attempt to see how we can leave some room to have the borders, even if they are not fully opened, at least have a way where we can have trade of goods and services, especially for critical value chains, as long as we ensure phytosanitary arrangements and human health inspections. It's also proposed that we can sustain agriculture and food systems if we enhance access to digital technologies and services, which will minimize face-to-face interaction and transactions and minimize risks of sicknesses. So we are also proposing that all actors, or all governments and other stakeholders should support micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises and farm organizations and cooperatives through dedicated financial facilities and other forms of support, such as fiscal incentives. We also propose that even while COVID is around or we are not yet recovering well, we should attempt to scale up and strengthen social protection measures, which can enable the poor and the vulnerable and marginalized who are affected by the issues I mentioned up above to meet their basic needs. And then we're also proposing that we should strengthen regional cooperation, enhance partnership, and cross-border coordination to help so that we can have inclusive, resilient pathways for stronger rural livelihoods and agriculture and food systems. In doing that, FAO and partners are proposing some priority areas in terms of action, which can help build that resilience. And these include putting in place monitoring and evaluation and learning and action situations in form of capturing good data, information, analyzing it, and using it to help how we can manage this COVID-19 situation, even as we talk of back to normal. But in addition to COVID, again, linking it together, disasters of locusts, of floods, of landslides, and any others, and climate change, of course, notwithstanding. We are also proposing that efforts should be made to promote decent work and gradual transition informality in the informal rural economy to make people have some reasonable incomes, especially the youth, the women, and migrant workers. We propose some safeguard measures for the most vulnerable people to improve their livelihoods and food security. And if possible, we propose some scaling up of cash plus interventions in form of unconditional cash transfers with agricultural livelihood inputs, thanks to governments which have been doing it. I've seen government of Uganda bringing in some programs and projects, government of Rwanda and government of Kenya, and we feel this should be stepped up. We also propose support open food supply chains, which can make now the farmers and people promoting agriculture have some leeway and assurance that whatever they produce can be taken by the consumers. And we promote that we appreciate climate change is still here to stay, even when you have those mega pandemics, it's still looming. So we propose that there should be adoption of climate smart approaches, and agroecology is one synergetic aspect of that, and other green innovations. So we should look at how we can have them along the value chain. Among the priorities, again, for agriculture and resilience programming, we propose incentive measures for smallholder farmers, mitigation of food losses and improving the market access, supporting livelihood diversification and home-based food production. And in that case, I'm quoting an example of farming through any possible means, say backyard garden, where if you say COVID comes to a family and they have some space, at least they are able to produce some food at minimal cost to have something to feed them. We are proposing adjusting the advisory services and having all possible communication, even when we are in disasters, say through mobile-based applications or farmer-to-farmer extension modalities. And we feel COVID is still here with us. We should attempt to limit virus transmission through the supply chains as much as possible by abiding by government suggestions and providing guidelines that can support dissemination of those mechanisms to the farmers and different actors. Yes, COVID is here with us, but there is a lot we have learned from it, and we feel we should always capture such lessons, though we have got them the hard way, or we are still getting them the hard way. There are some lessons I wanted to share with you, to say that probably learning from what has been done to respond to COVID challenges in the agriculture and food systems should be noteworthy to appreciate that we have said agroecology and other systems can be strengthened by having now more capacity in digitization of agriculture. The question is, how can we do it as fast and strongly? By using e-extension innovations, collective action in farming, marketing, and the rest of value chain. I took some records from what FAO has done, that this indeed comes in strongly, strengthen increases in the use of sustainable land management database digitally, strengthening sustainable land management and digital modules, and then capitalizing and on demonstrations that can be done amongst farmers to integrate e-learning now in the field. And also we have learned that if we can build on what people did, it can strengthen the call for attention to official government statements which emphasize nutrition from sustainable land management technologies, particularly the other different practices I mentioned, for example, agroforestry and high-value crops. I have a menu again extracted from FAO's database and other actors, which gives more action to minimize COVID-19's damaging effects. And they are summarized into 7 principles, which are saying that now agriculture and food systems should work to reinforce humanitarian response as a plan for living or in post-COVID. We should improve data for decision-making. We should ensure economic inclusion and social protection to reduce poverty, or at least reduce the poverty gap. There should be an effort to bolster trade and food safety standards. Efforts should be made to boost smallholder resilience for recovery. Smallholder, right from the smallest farmers, micro, small, and medium enterprises. And most importantly, knowing that COVID has a history where it's rumored to have come through transmission from animals, we should also put a bigger effort to prevent any likely zoonotic pandemics that may come in. We don't know which one will be next. We still have other roaming ones. And the 7th is that efforts should be made to trigger food systems and transformation. And I'm emphasizing that all that should be done involving a variety of stakeholders in disseminating agroecology practices in the new normal for the recovery of sustainable agriculture. And among those, I'm glad the Vice Chancellor brought faith-based institutions. They are willing and can help us. Cultural institutions are willing, can help us. Private sector is an interested party. And I would say we should bring in, we talk of youth, but even children who are the future leaders and farmers. I give more details on those 7, those are the 7. And I'm saying along all that, we should remember there's a monster which you won't know that there's COVID as we try to strengthen agrosystems, the monster called climate change. And here I'm giving some data why we can't keep a blind eye on it. Information in Uganda show that by 2013, we had climate change and its impact affect 800,000 hectares of crop each year. We have had losses in millions of dollars. We have had drought affecting loss in economic incentives. So even when we think of what to do, climate change is there waiting for us, and we have had lives lost. And I was saying another perspective we shouldn't forget is gender, and I'm giving again a case study of Uganda, why we can't say our actions are gender blind, because if you look at Uganda, 72% of the population employed in agriculture, you find 77% are women, 63% are youth. So you can't just say farming for everybody. We need to give attention to those gender perspectives, which are indicated in the data. If you look at, say, Uganda and farming, and where challengingly will say that Uganda loses up to 67 million in gender gaps in agricultural productivity. So even as we think of what to do during COVID response, we need to bring that gender dimension. Along the gender, I want to insist that we do consider special consideration with the youth. For one reason, they are the future leaders, they are the future farmers, they are innovative and can bring in the combination of what I mentioned as proposals. FAO has been working with partners to bring the youth through Africa Youth Agri-Food Systems. And I wanted to quickly share some 3 graphs on how young people, we call them agripreneurs, and we are projecting it through youth and informal workers, can come up and bring out improved farming systems and foster forward agroecology. I wanted to give an example on how For example, on a positive note, when you look at the youth farmers, those agropreneurs, they are brought in innovations in moving online marketing and sales, where I said now the lockdowns can't allow marketing. They are looking at online marketing, exploring alternative feeds and other inputs, and adding value to different products, which we should encourage and bring the youth on board, because I have found it a good opportunity of bringing them on board. I wanted to share with you 3 graphs which show that yes, even when the youth are innovating, they are challenged by COVID. And this is data carried out from a study carried out by FAO in 2020 recently, showing that COVID affected the youth, agripreneurs, and this is data from what they said, that they were affected also by losing markets, by losing income and livelihoods, by reduced social and cultural activities, limited access to work and office site and partners, and all that affected their innovation. Some were laid off, some were affected mentally, and they lowered their production. There is a report online, FAO 2020, on Africa's youth in agri-food systems, innovation in the context of COVID-19, and that's where that's drawn on impacts. Again, that same report shows that still, as we said, in the new normal, or in whatever situation comes with COVID, which we don't know, none of us knows where, there are still expected future impacts on work or on business, which is likely to come in form of financial loss, reduced market opportunities, opportunities to innovate and grow, reduced number of employees, reduced economic and labor opportunities, business closure, and increased market opportunities if we take the best, again, from that report. And we feel by looking at such, we can bring everybody without leaving the youth. And the third one is what support can be thought about. The youth propose some support in terms of financial support, for example, any form of cash, credit, or subsidies, support in form of inputs and equipment, social assistance and social insurance, capacity development and technological assistance, PPEs and health supplies, and access to markets, and improved digital infrastructure, which applies to as actions we need for post-COVID or new normal, or say whatever scenario comes in. So you'll get that from that report on Africa's youth in agri-food systems, which has been done by FAO and partners in 2020. Yes, I wanted to share with you just some 2 quick 3 photos about why I feel this works. Gender, I have here, most of you must have heard about the concept of the farmer field schools, and this was some graduation with farmer field schools. I've had an opportunity to interact with some of these youth whose data is reported, and they indicated that whatever they captured helped them during the challenges of COVID. So let's make sure we include the youth, let's make sure we include the women. And when we talk of youth, let's not go the other, I would say, political definition of saying a youth must be above 18 or 35. We have these future leaders who have gone through a big challenge with COVID coming when their brains are at the peak of growth. The youth, they are brought here photos of the Uganda Land Care Program workshop we had last year in Kabale for all countries in the world. And the children were showing us how they are doing good gardens, which I proposed in the previous presentation. And I feel we shouldn't forget them by saying youth start from 18 years. Let's try to stretch the youth definition to younger children. So I feel that looking forward, if we promoted agroecology, if we looked at these proposals, we should be able to contribute to strengthening of food supply chains and access to food for the poor, the vulnerable, and marginalized. And I feel that agroecological practices, if anchored on sustainable development goals, can help us in the new normal for the recovery of sustainable agriculture, remembering that we do it, and I'm happy about the pillars or cornerstones of agroecology, which looks at the social aspects of agriculture, the environmental aspect, and the economic aspect, which are rhyming well with the pillars of sustainable development. In conclusion, we should accept that COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in major economic and labor market shocks worldwide and different parts of the world, including food and agricultural systems. And unfortunately, of course, we have had more reactive sweeping and preventive measures, which have come again to limit ways we can have improvement in food and agriculture systems along the value chain. But I believe that short and long-term structure measures, if well thought about, can help build back a more resilient and innovative enabling environment, which should develop and implement the good future. And I'm pointing out that if you said what would be the 3 recommendations in terms of policy action, we should look at improved food and nutrition security governance, which strengthen production, storage, and conservation capacity along the agricultural value chain. We should make ways of ensuring continuity and stability of food system functions, and we should explore possibilities of investments, not only in food blanket, but in the environment, the natural resource management, and disaster risk reduction or management, which encompass what we are here to talk about agroecological approaches. So I feel agroecology would be one of the keywords I bring forth. Otherwise, I feel that what we are doing has been noted by different people, and in particular, trying to remember that we need to consider the marginalized and vulnerable systems. I conclude my presentation with a statement which I read from last 19th August, where Pope Francis is making a call for social justice and environmental considerations, which I also bring forth if we are to promote agroecology approaches. This is the Pope's message that the new post-pandemic society should be respectful of the poor and the environment they live in, or else we'll end up having the environment crumble and we crumble with it. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I'll be waiting for some questions for clarification later on. Otherwise, I thank you for listening to me and bring greetings from FAO and wish you all the best as we work hard to make sure that we live beyond the challenges of COVID-19 and other multiple disasters. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kakulu. That was a very, very wonderful exposition. We want to thank you for the wonderful breakfast you have given to us as agroecologists. As agriculture people, and some are students, some are farmers, some are business people. We are different from different walks of life. You've touched each and everyone's life. You reminded all of us about COVID. We've not forgotten, but we still need to be reminded of the numbers, of what is happening, the lockdowns, which we were scared that maybe today would be locked down. We thank you for all the exposition. We wouldn't have expected anything better than this. Thank you very much.
Welcome,
Colleagues,
Prof, and feel free to share that
wherever you are, please clap for Dr. Kakulu in your own way for this wonderful exposition. I'm sure there will be many questions, and when time comes, we shall send you the questions, which I'm sure you are very keen to respond to. Thank you also for keeping time. We are not late. We are still in time. We should be able to manage. So ladies and gentlemen, you've heard for yourself what our keynote address speaker has given to us. A very wonderful start, very wonderful appetizer. And now we are going to listen to our farmers. In the next 30 minutes, we shall be listening to, next 20 minutes, we'll be listening to our East African farmers. All of them will be giving us their take, partly on what they are doing and what they are likely to be doing in the future in order to combat the effects of COVID using agroecological practices. And we are starting with our farmer from Rwanda. Our farmer from Rwanda is known as Jean, Mr. Jean Marie Irakabaho. He's here with us. But before Jean speaks, I want to say something little about Jean. Jean is our close friend. He's a friend of Uganda. He's a friend of East Africa. He's a wonderful farmer. Jean is the proprietor of Posada Limited Company, which is a Rwanda-based company. He's an agronomist, and Jean has done a lot of work in sustainable agriculture. He has trained and provided needed technical coaching to many coffee and tea growers, cooperatives, and factories, fruits and vegetables, producers and exporters towards compliance to targeted standards, especially by promoting sustainability via activities among many other things, aiming to conserve biodiversity and ensure sustainable livelihoods by transforming land use practices, business practices, consumer behavior, and many other things. His profile is large and very rich. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture from the University of Rwanda and a Master's of Science from the University of Rwanda. He brings in a lot of experience in sustainable agriculture and ecological organic agriculture, and therefore he's the right person to speak on behalf of our friends of Rwanda in order to look at different ways of combating COVID-19 using agroecological means. Jean, you are most welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Professor Julius. Do you hear me well?
We hear you, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So I am here. I am very happy to provide my humble input, and briefly, I am going to talk as a coffee farmer. I'm managing a coffee farm, and during the next sessions, I will be sharing more on processing and marketing because I am covering also those stages also along the value chain. So thank you very much. And concerning the situation of COVID in Rwanda, my own experience is that this situation had highlights the importance of agroecology system in food security and the food supply chain. In Rwanda, we have been now experiencing the home delivery food, fruit and vegetable. Producers who are applying agroecology have been organizing on Facebook, on mobile technology, information, and you can order potato, you can order fruit and the vegetable, and they deliver on a motorcycle at your home. And this is a potential. And the number two is in Rwanda, we have a good and strong program of kitchen garden. We saw how that is important to grow your own vegetables at your home so that you cannot rely on buying a market on every day. And especially from 21st March up to 2nd of June, it was totally locked down in Rwanda. And it was not easy, it was almost impossible to go to buy something on market because markets are closed. So I had been relying on Giden Garden because of myself. I will share later, maybe next session, on how we do compost. I am raising earthworms. I do vermicomposting. All cabbage from my kitchen, I compost it using earthworms, and I have a good high nutrient compost to apply on my home garden. So this is in agroecology is very, very important, how to scale up the agroecological practices at every single household, especially the most vulnerable hole, can change the concept that relying on supply food from market. So, and the other thing is that we have been learning is the solidarity. Because of agroecology, what I like most is plus the environment, but there is ecological but social concept. And in this social concept in Rwanda, this situation of COVID showed that Rwandan culture, how Rwandan culture can enhance solidarity by providing food to most vulnerable families who are locked in a house without food, without anything. In Rwanda, we have different 5 level of category based on the level of economy of the household, from the richest to the poor. And based on those data, at the village level, the ones more vulnerable on the category 4 and 5 had been identified. We know it, and then we had been contributing money, and mostly in food, and distributing food to the vulnerable. But this solidarity we need to learn some lesson from this situation. As a farmers, even for fruit and vegetable, I am a coffee farmer. I would like to talk as a coffee farmer. We can longer rely only on external input. So the COVID-19 happened, and we realized that farmers who had been applying agroecological practices like mulching, where we have some more constraints of getting mulching because of, in Rwanda, household land is not big as in Uganda or other countries. Sometimes you don't have enough space to plant mulching material so that you can cut and apply on a coffee farm. So we had been doing extension to apply cover crops where we don't have a mulching material. Cover crops to plant shade trees, to plant leguminous trees, boundary of the coffee farm. We realized that a coffee farm managed in an agroecological way are resilient than conventional coffee. So, and this is something for coffee. Maybe in the next session, I will make a presentation on the coffee appellations that we have been developing here since 8 years in Rwanda. What the agroecology, what we realize that agroecological practices can improve the intensity of the coffee profile flavor tapping. And I can share one page here, possible to understand what I forget. 1 second. Okay, do you hear my screen? Do you see it, my screen?
Yes, it's okay.
Yes, I'm very interested to participate all sessions because of some aspect along the value chain will be more important for the next sessions. But I am talking about Arabica coffee in Rwanda. Those are the aspects influencing, because of in Rwanda since 2006, 2008, the government took an orientation to access to niche market which can pay more to farmers, because we cannot increase the area at big scale, but we can transform the quality of the coffee that we have to access niche market. That came the aspect of appellation. Appellation is the concept explaining that every agriculture product, the taste of it has an origin of the variety and those criteria that you see, the terroir, and especially the culture practices. That way, the agroecological practices intervene. So this, I don't have enough time, but I would like to go to this delineation. Rwandan coffee, in order to reach the niche market, all Rwandan coffee doesn't have all the same quality profile. We did delineations based on the potential of the soil, elevation, climate, but when it comes to the agriculture practices, that way I would like to emphasize the impact of agroecological practices on coffee quality profile. This is the sensory profile of the quality of the coffee that we produce North Kivu as a sample, because of to penetrate which niche market, which are providing high prices. You need to comply with those quality profile required, because it is a high level quality profile. For example, if you apply agroecological practices, I give you 2 or 3 examples. For Arabica coffee, we all know that Arabica coffee, the feeder roots of Arabica coffee, 90% of feeder roots are only in 50 centimeter deep. So this means any nutrient, any water is drained below 1 meter in deep layers is not available to is not easily available to the coffee crop. So this means by planting shade trees, the choice of shade trees are chosen to based on the rooting system. The rooting system can by tying up the nutrients who were lost in a deep layer of the soil are up in up layer of soil, and the coffee can uptake. Number 2, by applying a good mulching, you are improving the humus of the soil and the capacity of the soil, the holding capacity of the soil, so that it can supply water and nutrients to the crop. And then by planting leguminous trees, you are fixing nitrogen to the crop. All this can, and the last one I would do, because I don't have enough time, the last one is the pruning. By applying the pruning before spraying a pesticide, by doing the pruning, you are changing the microclimate in the canopy of the crop, of the coffee trees, and this reduces the incidence of population of the insect. So by doing so, you are increasing, or you are enhancing the intensity. When I talk the intensity, if we say, for example, aroma lemon in coffee here, this intensity will increase, is more likely to increase, and here to increase, and then which was lower, like a tested tartanic, can increase, and you have the change of this sensory profile of quality of coffee. This has been really a trend during the last 6 years, that applying agroecological practices, you enhance the better and consistency in the quality profile that's needed on a market. And the number 2, you enhance the resiliency of the production system to achieve the productivity and the quality that you want. So that's why during the next sessions on research, the training and the research, we'll make a presentation on what could be, what could the research be assessing in terms of the impact of agroecological practices on the quality of coffee and the market access. And this will be, I will prepare this later on the marketing. So in summary, I would like to say, as a farmer, coffee farmer, since 20 years, agroecological practices are enhancing resiliency and also reducing dependency to the external input supply. That's why I would like to make a call for some service providers like input distributors or extensionists to go for it, or to change the way we do things. Thank you very much. It took a longer time than expected.
Thank you, Jean, for the wonderful presentation. Indeed, friends, you've heard from our speaker what is happening in Rwanda, and we are glad to learn from you. What is happening in Rwanda is very wonderful, especially looking at the social aspects, helping each other, farmers coming together and helping those who are vulnerable, and also keeping those kitchen gardens. They are very, very, very important. And I'm sure many Ugandans have also learned to keep that. But what is very much more interesting is about coffee. And I'm sure some Ugandans would want to learn from you. And when we invite you again, we shall need more detail on that, those aspects of coffee and how one can come up with the better qualities of coffee in order to capture the niche markets. Thank you once again.
You're welcome.
Our next speaker is a Ugandan speaker, our farmer from Uganda. And he's no other than Mr. Hakim Barireine. Hakim, are you with us?
Yes.
Hakim?
Yes.
Yes, Hakim is with us. I'm told Hakim is on the road traveling, but we want to thank you for joining us even when you're on the road. And before Hakim speaks, I want to say something little about Hakim. Hakim is a farmer, but also a leader and a mentor. Farmer is a small-scale farmer from Mayuge district here in Uganda. He's the vice chairperson of ESAF Mayuge, the national chairperson of ESAF Uganda, and the chairperson of ESAF in the region of 16 countries. He also represents People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty in Africa, the Global Executive Committee. He's also a member of the Executive Committee of Ecological Organic Agriculture National Platform, and he sits on the Regional Steering Committee of Ecological Organic Agriculture. Hakim is a small-scale farmer, and he holds a certificate in agroecology attained from the California University. He is a trained animal husbandry person, and he does a lot of advocacy for agroecology amongst farmers in Uganda and everywhere. Hakim, we want to thank you for giving us your time and accepting to talk to us. Over to you, Hakim. Hakim,
Hello.
are you with us?
Yes, yes. Hello, everyone. You are hearing me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Sorry, I'm traveling. My network has been on and off, so I've not followed other people who are presenting very well, but at least I had some few things which were said. As already been introduced, my my presentation outline will show to those who do not know about ESAF, then the agroecology practices for sustainable agriculture in the new normal, then challenges, then the farmers' call and the conclusions. ESAF Uganda appreciates the objective of this webinar, which focuses on analyzing the contribution of agroecology, the recovery of the sustainable agriculture during the COVID-19 period. Eastern and Southern Africa Small-Scale Farmers Forum, in short, ESAF Uganda, exists to create a platform to bring together small-scale farmers into a farmer-led advocacy movement, influence policies and practices at the local and national level, contribute through ESAF to policies and practices at regional, continental, and global level. ESAF Uganda is also a small-scale farmer-led advocacy movement formed to facilitate processes through which small-scale farmers' development concerns can be solicited, articulated, and ultimately addressed through policies and programs. ESAF Uganda focuses on advancing economic empowerment, agroecology, and food sovereignty. ESAF Uganda also is currently having a membership of 1,357 farmer groups with 48,210 individual small-scale farmers, of which 64% are women in 54 districts under the administration of 30 Exotical Districts Forums. Going back to the theme, agroecology practices for sustainable agriculture to recover during and after COVID-19. What have we been doing? We've established, we small-scale farmers are learning in agroecology schools by sharing knowledge and information on different agroecology practices and methods, hence empowering each other. That is maybe through agroforestry, compost manure making, making and use soil and water conservation, construction of soil banks, etc., as you've been hearing many other people mentioning. Another area is the farmer-led schools. We are using this period to conduct seed research in farmer field schools. This is empowering farmers to select and preserve healthy seeds so that we can protect our seed security and sovereignty. To support sustainability of agriculture, an online organic agriculture platform was created to share documented best agroecology and organic practices through audio, video, and illustrations in different local languages. This information is empowering small-scale farmers and general public, initiated by ESAF Uganda. During lockdown, our produce lacked stable and reliable market. So ESAF Uganda developed this application known as Kilimomat to create a market linkage for agroecology small-scale farmers. The application is used by different small-scale farmers to sell organic and agroecologically grown produce in Uganda and beyond. Many private companies and businesses dealing in the seed industry closed, and during this period, it was very difficult for small-scale farmers to access seed, yet it was the planting season. But through the community seed bank, the seed challenges were addressed, which some of the farmers were facing, and built a case for farmer-managed seed system. Hence, this was approved as a sustainable way. Much as we may wish to have sustainable agriculture, but farmers are not united. When farmers are not united, it can be a nightmare. So to bridge up this, ESAF Uganda has employed the Gender Action Learning System, which we call GALS, technique to mitigate gender-based violence amongst the farming household. GALS has highlighted and addressed some gender challenges in the community. limited group participation in farm practices, hence limited information sharing among ourselves, the small-scale farmers. Some of the small-scale farmers have faced. I was now I'd gone to the area of challenges after the practices. What challenges have we been facing during and after? Because COVID is still there. So one of them was limited group participation. We know very well that farmers come together to discuss various issues, and most of the women, they've been using these groups for saving. And now when the social distancing is not there and the lockdown was not there and coming together was very difficult. So this became a very big challenge to the smallholder farmers at the grassroots. So some of the small-scale farmers have also faced additional problems like the floods and locusts during COVID-19 period, which is escalating the problem. You know very well that when we were still under the lockdown, the floods came. You saw very well in the Kasese, farms were destroyed. Those people living along the Lake Victoria shores, the water came and destroyed the gardens. So this one became a very big challenge. However, we at SF level, we've been able to come up with solutions to help our small-scale farmers. Some of the small-scale farmers, there is inadequate access to agroecology extension service providers. You know very well that our government, the extension workers who are produced or who are into the field, they come with a gospel of conventional agriculture. Now, when it comes to agroecology, in some time back, they were calling it backward farming, that when you are practicing agroecology, you are backward. So for us, this has been a challenge and has continued to be a challenge. Further to integrate after, there is also limited access to markets since weekly markets were closed, where farmers used to sell their products and produce. Who doesn't know that on a weekly basis we was taking our goats, cows, and other food to those markets, but when they were closed down, it is very impossible for us to access. There is also increased cases of domestic violence among some farming communities. You've been hearing and seeing on the TV. Then the exploitation of small-scale farmers by middlemen who pay very low prices for their produce. This one has been a cutting across. You saw the farmers of the poultry, fish, eggs. The eggs fell down. The tray was costing 6,000, even 4,000. So this was a very big challenge in that area. Land grabbing during restriction and lockdown. Though the government pronounced that there will be no activity dealing with the land, but you saw people are being evicted, farmers were being thrown away from their land. So this was also a big concern. Our call, agroecology farmer call for policy change in Uganda to enable sustainable agriculture recovery. One, we want further integration of agroecology practices into the extension services delivered to small-scale farmers. Second, we want the development and implementation of a strategy for upscaling agroecology in Uganda. You know very well also on the third issue that very many policies and treaties are being signed. So here, we want the government to disband all non-agricultural friendly policies like the GMO bill, the PVP, the Plant Variety Protection Act, the East African Seed and Plant Variety Bill, among others. Integrate agroecology in all school curriculum, such that it is not done by private institutions. We know Uganda Matters University, St. Lawrence, and others are training agroecology up to master levels, but it is not into the curriculum of the government. So we find that at Makerere, it is not there, Timbara, and other schools. Government should embrace participatory research, which involves both the research institutions and agroecology farmers in the sustainable agriculture. If sustainable agriculture is to recover fully. In my conclusion, sustainable agriculture fosters biodiversity that is relatively resilient to the impact of climate change. It depends on and sustains ecosystem, as well as tapping into the knowledge, practices, and innovations of local communities, which can lead to increased food security and farm incomes. There is a promising future for agroecology in Uganda. However, the challenge now is to speed up, scale out, share relevant knowledge and practices, and coordinate appropriate policies to boost best agroecology practices in the country and region at large, so that sustainable agriculture is fully recovered. Lastly, please thank you. You can visit our website for more information. Thank you. I've been in a rush because we are still moving and towards success. I thank you for giving us opportunity to speak to this forum and webinar. Thank you. I submit.
Thank you, Hakim, Mr. Hakim Baridine, for the wonderful presentation. We are sorry that you're on the road, but we thank you for accepting to give us this presentation even when you're on the road. We want to thank you for the exposition concerning what Ugandan agroecologists, agroecological farmers are doing, and we've learned quite a lot. We thank you for spearheading that campaign to ensure that small-scale farmers continue to get educated about agroecology, but also to help each other as farmers. I'm sure we've learned quite a lot. We'd want to still learn more about what you are doing so that together we can work and ensure that agroecology is stepped up in Uganda and in all other countries. Thank you very much.
It is my pleasure. I'll keep online where I need to be for responses. I will try and see if I can respond to queries when they are raised.
Okay, thanks. We shall send you responses, but we shall also alert you when it comes to the QA time, such that you participate in answering some questions. Thank you. Next, ladies and gentlemen, we have a distinguished farmer from Kenya, in the names of Madame Elizabeth Njimol. Elizabeth, are you with us? Elizabeth? I'm not seeing Elizabeth online. Elizabeth, are you connected? Unfortunately, Elizabeth is not yet with us. I don't know whether Hakim, you can help us to get Elizabeth. Okay.
Elizabeth, I've been trying to reach them, but I do not know what has happened. Even the coordinators phone, they told me electricity, they had a problem of electricity for the next 3 days. Their transformers in that area went off. So they have been having that challenge and they have not been having power. So I'm not so sure whether it is the issue why they are not there, because I've also been trying to make sure that they are in the meeting. So I have no other information about their whereabouts if they are not online.
Okay, thank you, Hakim, but we shall keep waiting just in case she joins us. And as we wait for her to join, we also have a speaker from Tanzania in the names of Madame Flexis Manjaro. Flexis Manjaro, are you with us? Madame Flexis? Madame Flexis Manjaro? Oh, we have it appears we do not have those two with us yet, but they agreed to be with us. And I suggest that since they are not yet with us, we keep on waiting for them, but we go to the next series of speakers, such that when they come, they can give us their speeches anytime. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think now we go to our panelists. And we have 3 panelists today. And the first panelist will be Dr. Sekandi. The second one will be Madame Stella Grace Lutalo. And the third one will be Professor Charles Sechewa. And may I request that we start with Dr. Sekandi. And before Dr. Sekandi comes online, I would like to request my co-convener to introduce Dr. Sekandi. Thank you.
Thank you very much, convener. Thank you very much, convener. I will introduce Dr. Sekandi, who is currently the Dean at the Faculty of Agriculture. Dr. Joseph Sekandi is a specialist in dryland resources management with a PhD from the University of Nairobi. He has an inclination in rangeland management and social systems. He has greatly participated in capacity building in agroecology since 2010. That means we have a wealth of experience of 10 years with him participating in capacity building. He also supervises students at Uganda Matters University, right from BSc to PhD, and is currently the Dean of the Faculty of Agriculture. Dr. Sekandi also has a master's degree from the University of Reading in the UK, so he brings with him the wealth of experience, and we are ready to listen to him. Please welcome Dr. Joseph Sekandi. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Can I also just cross-check if I'm heard?
Yes, please.
Oh, thank you very much. First, I would like to welcome all colleagues who have joined this webinar. I'm so delighted to see a number of partners that we've been working with over the years in agroecology and ecological organic agriculture. I'm delighted to see former students, our alumni, who have been very good ambassadors of these programs. But I'm also delighted to see the current students. I've seen PhD students, master students, and 3 undergraduate students. I think that's a very good sign. Again, I also want to thank the Africa Center of Excellence in Agroecology and Food Systems, ACALISE, that organized this webinar series to participate and to help us bring us up to speed to what can be done in agroecology. I also want to thank the presenters that have come ahead of me. Very specifically, I want to thank Dr. Willy Kapulu. I want to thank our farmer from Rwanda. I want to thank her team, Jean-Marie from Rwanda and her team. Now, as a discussant, what I've been doing throughout is to scribble some notes down to base my discussion on. And whatever I'm going to say is going to be based on my thoughts on what has been said by the 3 speakers. Unfortunately, I've missed the other 2. Perhaps it would have enriched what I wanted to say. But also I wanted to perhaps speak a little bit on what has been done at Uganda Matters University, the constituency that I represent here. Since 2009, the Faculty of Agriculture has been grappling with the questions of how can we keep the same smallholder farm productive without affecting the ecological systems on which it sits. Now that took a lot of approaches. At the beginning, the focus was mainly on advocacy. And we thank God that part of our advocacy work, we went across the country in 2009, explaining to people with the leadership of, I remember Professor Secheo was the principal investigator of that project, and I think he's coming up also later as a discussant. We went all over this country trying to speak to people about agroecology. And the key question was, what is the science that you are bringing across? And in the minds of policy, and mind of farmers, in mind of opinion leaders, the problem was actually a science. That there wasn't any interest or any focus on what about the social issues that affect food production? What about the ecological issues that affect production? The settlement issues. We know that most households have been living on the same farms for generations and generations. But then the key question was, what is the science? So we actually came back, and when we introduced the masters in 2010, we dealt with the science of how best can you establish an agroecological farm. The science, of course, went through a master's. Right now we have a PhD program, and also we have decided to establish a demonstration farm to indicate to farmers, to policies, to all stakeholders on what is the best agroecological farm, something that we have here at our campus. But to leave that, I want to focus on the presentations that have been made by colleagues here. I think I want us to, I hope my screen is seen. I want us to first go back and remind ourselves the populations in Africa here and Eastern Africa. If you look at Africa, we are told that we have 1.216 billion people currently. This country, Uganda, has approximately 46 million people. And what is very strange is that the median age is 16. So we have a lot of young people across the continent, by the way. But also, when you look at Kenya, they're also approaching 54 millions. Rwanda, probably, I've not seen the current figures. What I saw for Rwanda is 2018. It is 12.9 plus. Ethiopia, of course, that is all part of Eastern Africa, is 114 million people. And Tanzania, 58. Now, from what Dr. Kakulu has said, of course, with the COVID pandemic, we have experienced, is my screen seen, Chair? Excuse me? Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what Dr. Kakulu has presented to us, and what I found very fascinating, is that with the COVID, and of course, with the lockdown, with the restriction on mobility, there's been a change in food supply systems. Not many imports cannot move in, whether it is fertilizers, whether it is seeds. We have also had issues related to the export that because of the flights. But I actually think that this has created better agroecological opportunities. I think that with the restrictions on movements, and I hope even we can have a better import substitution, and the food demand across the country, especially in urban centers, I think for me this has increased the need to be mitigated through behavioral changes. And I think here I want to talk about consumption patterns and lifestyles generally. Now, these behavioral changes and the structural changes in food systems and supply chains. So rather than giving a lot of focus on the markets, can we have a lot of focus on local produce? And can we also generate local markets that food can actually move around communities? I'm not taking us back to barter trade systems, but what I'm suggesting is that perhaps local markets, a shift from the international financial market systems of trade, of imports, of exports, etc., to a much more integrated local market. Now, also from what Mr. Kakulu, Dr. Kakulu has presented, I think he has also talked about the current food systems produce, how food is produced. But generally what I see across, and maybe something that within the agroecological circles, things we need to deal with, is issues related to food waste and overconsumption that is actually leading to mass health problems. Take a walk around all local markets. Look at the perishable issue, the perishables. If you take all these highways, you find a broken truck. And when the truck breaks down with the matoke and it takes 5 days, it takes hours to be repaired, you're actually going to have the whole of that truck full of food lost. So there's actually a lot of food waste, whether in transit, even at the point source, at production level. If you harvested tomatoes and you're waiting for a buyer from Kampala, if a buyer loses a person, you're likely not to have your market sold. And all that is lost. So I think innovations in value addition and reducing waste are very helpful. When it comes to the issues related to health problems related to food consumption, currently, by the way, there's a lot of advertisement that goes on with clean food. And I think I've seen Professor Sechewa and colleagues at Nogamu trying to scale up organic food markets. Now, there is a study that I've just seen this morning as I was preparing, from World Health Organization, indicating that actually diseases like diabetes and other lifestyle diseases, but specifically diabetes here, is on an increase in the developing world. We are told that 10 years from now, we'll have in Africa alone 438 million people affected by diabetes. All this has a lot to do with food consumption, the types of food we consume. Now, our farmers in Kabale are producing fresh potatoes and selling them to the market. But the value addition in food preparations actually loses the old nutrition value that is within the potatoes, and we end up with health-related complications. So I found that very interesting. I want to thank our colleague from Rwanda who has made a very interesting discussion related to food delivery in Rwanda, how food is able to be delivered, and things related to kitchen gardening. Of course, I can understand it from him as being a core coffee farmer, and a number of our farmers that are involved in cash crop production, perhaps not many produce enough food. And there's nothing wrong with that. Anyway, they can afford to buy the food. But I think within the whole scaling out production of food and cash crops per se, we haven't paid a lot of attention from the destruction of the important ecosystems. And I think this will have very dramatic effects, and it will further undermine the foundation of our food systems, and maybe later on actually lead to poverty and conflict. I don't know whether people in this country are familiar with a farm in Mubende district, where more than 5 villages were erased of people. There are a lot of examples of places where commercial agriculture is growing very fast. And I think this is actually growing in key ecological hotspots. And I haven't seen a number of, probably, I've not seen any environmental impact assessment reports that have been done in that area called Madudu in Mubende, where coffee was introduced. I haven't seen also, perhaps it is there, if there is anybody in this platform who can share with us also, an ecological and environmental impact assessment that was done around Ruera when we were establishing a large-scale rice farm, and how that is going to affect the aquatic life around Lake Victoria in areas of Golo and the landing site around that area. Perhaps we are familiar with this southern part of the Lake Victoria and the production of tilapia. So it could be very interesting to see, but I think for me, whereas we want to scale up production, we want to increase agriculture production, it is so important to have a little bit of consideration of the dangers that might come out of these production systems and the ecosystems that support production over the years. As I try to summarize, Chair, I want to pose perhaps key questions, and this webinar is mainly about production. How do we deal with food production externalities? Because there are a number of them. There are issues related to runoff into our wetland and waterborne systems. There are issues to do with the management of waste production, waste produced from whether it is bags that are packaging bags for seeds and etc., whether it is the acaricides and pesticides, whether it is the plowing systems upstream and how that, all those for me generate externalities, but I've not seen a lot of focus on at farm level to deal with those. I think the focus is mainly on maximizing production, and I think agroecology makes us pay attention to dealing with those externalities. The other question I want to raise here is, can we attain this level, the dealing with externalities through appropriate governance structures that address the disruptive effect of unregulated production? I think from the 1980s and early 1990s, we had very strong farmer corporations that governed all aspects of the production value chain, managed production, the seed distribution, managed the input, whether it's fertilizer or manure, managed production and etc. But I think right now, over-reliance on the market alone, I think puts us at a very difficult risk. And this is where I want to applaud efforts by people like organizations like ESAF that have been trying to create, I think also PELAM and these organizations that have been trying to create local governance structures that regulate the whole production. I think what we need to pay attention to is perhaps to scale it a little bit upper to increase research uptake of our farmers. There's a lot of advocacy work, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think there's a lot of new innovations that are taking place within agroecology that can be uptaked through these governance structures, whether it is farmer groups, whether it's farmer associations, whether it is the local government structures that all of us can have a debate around. I think these are things we need to pay specific attention to. And finally, Chair, as someone from a university and a knowledge institute, I want to emphasize that scientific advances have the potential to bring forward technological solutions that are productive, that reduce resource use, and preserve biodiversity. I think there's a danger that civil society organizations and farmers, they tend to look at science and knowledge institutes as promoters of the bad science. I want to emphasize here that we are not only about GMOs and biotechnology. We are also about ecological organic agriculture. We are also about clean technologies. We are also about all the technologies that will support you to increase productivity, but also ensure there is continuous production and preservation of our Mother Earth. I want to submit, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sekandi, for that wonderful presentation. Indeed, you have represented your constituency so well. And yes, quoting from Rwanda, quoting from Dr. Kakuru, quoting from all other speakers is what we expected you to do, but also adding what you are doing at Uganda Matters University has beefed up the whole presentation. We want to thank you for that wonderful exposition, and I'm sure it's been a very good opening address from the panelists. So we shall have questions for you later, so please keep around. And next, we shall request Professor Sechewa to speak to us, the second panelist. Professor Sechewa, are you with us? Professor Sechewa? Professor Charles Sechewa. I've been seeing Professor on, but maybe the network is off. Possibly she'll come on later. Our next panelist is Madame Stella Lutalo from Pelham, Uganda. Madame Stella, are you with us?
Yes, I am with you.
Madame Stella, are you with us?
Yes, I am. I can hear you.
Oh, thank you very much for joining us. Before Madame Stella speaks to us, may I take this opportunity to briefly introduce Madame Stella. Madame Stella is a country coordinator of Participatory Ecological Land Use Management, which is Pelham, Uganda. Pelham, Uganda is a 25-year-old network of 60 civil society organizations that work to improve the livelihoods of smallholder farmers and sustainability of farming communities by fostering ecological land use management. Pelham, Uganda works through her countrywide membership to reach over 3 million smallholder farmers around the country. Stella has been at the helm of growing Pelham, Uganda to become one of the lead players on agroecology in Uganda. And Pelham, Uganda currently spearheads national level platforms for knowledge and experience sharing on agroecology, including diversity, food and seed fairs, policy dialogues, symposia, capacity development programs, and information sharing platforms. Stella has a background in development studies. He's actually one of us, trained at Uganda Matters University, and he brings in an experience of 14 years of service in development work. Stella, you are very welcome, and over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor, for the introduction. I'm very privileged to join this webinar, and I'm also very privileged to be the First Lady to be part of this event. I've carefully listened to the previous speakers, and I also have some thoughts to share before I get into what was striking from the other presentations and speakers that came before me. I must say that food has not been clearly highlighted as a remedy for COVID. Or I must say it has not been overemphasized. Like when you see COVID adverts, COVID communications, yes, we see a lot of social distancing, masks, washing hands and all that, but we are not seeing so much talked about food as a remedy. And I must say that it very much is, especially agroecologically produced food. I want to also highlight that food has a role to play specifically when it comes to boosting immunity and enabling us to cope with the pandemic, but also it has a big role to play in terms of healing and recovery from COVID. So food makes it more likely that you will get COVID or die from it if you got it. So I must emphasize that food is a remedy that has not yet been overemphasized in managing the pandemic. And like we all know, we have an issue of vulnerability to COVID. Who are vulnerable? We know it's the elderly, we know it's those who are obese, and this comes from unhealthy eating, but we also know that the most vulnerable are those with underlying illnesses that have already been mentioned. And these underlying illnesses, like the likes of heart diseases, like cancers, like diabetes, like high blood pressure, have a lot to do with eating, has a lot to do with lifestyle and what we eat. And therefore food has a big role to play in managing the pandemic. And I'm not just talking about food, but good quality food, highly nutritious, agroecologically produced food. And I want to also highlight remarks that were made by the Honorable Minister of Finance when he was reading the budget speech for 2019-2020 budget speech. He mentioned that there are three major development challenges that Uganda is facing. And one was unemployment, high rates of unemployment among the young people, and specifically at that point in time, that was before COVID, that 4 of 10 young Ugandans are jobless. And I was very concerned with the statistics shared by Dr. Kakuru about the impact of COVID on employment and youth, which is worsening. And it was already an underlying challenge for us as a country and getting worse. And we need to think about how can we create jobs for youth in agriculture? How can we interest them to be more active in the sector? It's food for thought for all of us. Another challenge that was highlighted was income inequality. The gap between the rich and the poor, between rural and urban, also regional imbalances like northern and south, and like northern Uganda, eastern Uganda, compared to central and western, and that being a challenge that is also being worsened by COVID. We're seeing more challenges between more inequalities between rural and urban. And there was a dimension that COVID brought in when it came to food and rural and urban settings. We all noticed the situation when we had the lockdown. It was very evident that the urban poor were worse off because they had because they live hand to mouth, and the rural poor even if they are poor, they at least had something to eat. So the dynamics were different when it came to food and the kind of inequalities that we do have. And then another issue that was highlighted was, as a key development challenge for Uganda, was malnutrition and unhealthy lifestyles. And it was clearly stated that we have issues of malnutrition, 53%. It's an alarming 53% of children under 5 that are malnourished, of which 29% are stunted. We also have 32% of women in reproductive age that are malnourished. So we already have underlying food-related problems as a country that are getting worse by the COVID pandemic. So we are challenged as stakeholders in agroecology to be able to front solutions that are to do with food and also provide options to healthy eating, especially for the affluent who are still also struggling with inappropriate feeding and causing increase in non-communicable diseases. From what has been shared, yes, Dr. Sekandi has mentioned it, but I'm emphasizing that not much has been said about what needs to be done when it comes to advocacy. Yes, we don't want to keep lamenting, but we need to be able to do some advocacy and lobbying to see that government prioritizes budgets and policies that are going to help us get out of this situation. For example, when we look at the agriculture sector budget, where are the areas that could be prioritized to enable the country deal with the challenges posed by COVID? Here, a lot has already been mentioned around extension, around inputs, around markets, but how has the sector prioritized these areas with the support of budgets to be able to support the sector to survive or even thrive amidst this pandemic? Then what I also found striking was from Dr. Kakuru's presentation around support needed post-COVID than in the new normal. And what was standing out strongly, especially for young people and the sector, was financial support came out strongly. Financial services for agriculture. We know very well that agriculture is a sector that struggles. Most of the financial institutions do not find it a sector where they can invest because of the risk of the high risks involved. But we need to, the question is, how can we improve access to finance, especially for smallholder farmers? Like Dr. Kakuru clearly ended saying that the post-COVID should be respectful of the poor and the environment, and the poor are the most affected when it comes to access to finance to be able to recover and be able to invest more in agriculture so that it can feed us as we go through this challenge. So financial services was very key. Then he also clearly highlighted the issue of underlying challenges that we already have, like climate change. Like we saw on the side of health, the most vulnerable are those that already have underlying health conditions. Same with agriculture, it's affected because it has underlying challenges that, like climate change, because agriculture is highly dependent on weather and climate. And so we need to see that as a sector, we are looking into how are we resilient to climate change. And I'm happy to note that agroecology provides a number of solutions to enable us be more resilient to the impacts of climate change. And he also raised the issue of involvement of a variety of stakeholders in the fight. How can we involve the young people? How can we involve cultural institutions, policymakers, gender, and how can all these stakeholders work together? Like we are here talking to each other as mainly our agriculture stakeholders. How can we bring others on board? How can we bring the health sector on board? Because issues around nutrition and health are directly under the health sector. How can we have these conversations to have solutions that are integrated and can give us solutions to coping with the pandemic? The farmers were also able to share very interesting experiences. I like the experiences around coping with the pandemic, coping as farmers, like online markets and going online. And we still need to ask, how accessible are these online platforms to the vulnerable smallholder farmers? Or how can we encourage them to improve their capacities in using their simple technologies that they already have, like the mobile phones? We need to look into that. Also remembering the quote again by Dr. Kakuru, that we need to be respectful of the poor environment as we come up with these solutions and innovations. Then I also liked what Hakim said around the innovations around, or the strategies around the gender action learning systems. One of the 10 elements of agroecology is human and social value, where there's respect for both men and women and the roles they play in agriculture. During the pandemic, up to now, you have seen the skyrocketing cases of gender-based violence because people were stuck in their homes and they already had conflicts in the home, and these have led to a number of deaths in the home, a number of suicides and homicides. And we need to see that we look into these gender issues to ensure that both men and women work together and improve social relations and gender equality as part of agroecology. It's very central to agroecology. I also liked what came through when it comes to land grabbing. Land is a factor of production. It's a key factor of production. We are here talking about production. And if you do not have security of tenure on the land, then the agricultural production and productivity is highly compromised. We need to look into issues around land rights and policies that are supportive of the smallholder farmers. One of the 10 elements, again, for agroecology is responsible governance. How can we have farmers and producers be more involved in policy processes and laws that are affecting agriculture, like issues around land rights? Most of the agriculture is on customary land, which is not very well regulated and subject to abuse by land grabbers. How can we strengthen this to be able to ensure that production and productivity are guaranteed amidst the COVID situation? Those are some of the issues I picked from the presenters that came before me. I beg to submit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Stella. That was indeed a very, very important spice for all of us. I congratulate you for having been the first lady to present. Always be the first. Thank you very much. You know, we had two other ladies, one from Kenya, one from Tanzania, but none of them has appeared. I hope they are getting online soon. But thank you for representing ladies so far. And with that, wonderful presentation. Thank you for quoting from different speakers. Thank you for bringing your ideas. Thank you for the exposition about food. Indeed, as you've noted, no one cares about food. Maybe it should also be put among the soaps. Why not? Because we cannot live without food. And as you've suggested, there is need for a lot of advocacy, which sometimes is also neglected. And therefore, we want to thank you for a very well balanced presentation this morning. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we still have one more speaker, and we shall also cross-check whether our Kenyan speaker and the Tanzanian speakers are yet online. But before we do that, I would like to inquire whether Professor Sechewa is online now. He has been coming on and off. Professor Sechewa, please. Professor Charles Sechewa. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Sechewa appears not to be online. He's on now. Professor? Professor Sechewa, please unmute yourself. Hello? Professor, unmute yourself. Can you hear us? Professor Sechewa, please. We are trying to see how we can unmute Professor Sechewa because he's online. We don't want to miss the speech by the presentation by Professor Sechewa because he's one of the founder members of Agroecology in Africa, and therefore his speech is very, very key. We do not want to miss it. Professor Sechewa, please. Professor Sechewa. As we wait for Professor Sechewa, I think I'll be introducing him. Professor Sechewa is a professor of agriculture. He's one of the founder members of Agroecology in East Africa and a very key member of organic agriculture. He's one of the first people to come up with the idea of training organic agriculturists. Professor Sechewa has educated very many people in organic agriculture and agroecology. He has been behind coming up with different curricula in organic agriculture and agroecology. He has done quite a lot of work in terms of pathology and entomology and general agronomy as far as organic agriculture and agroecology is concerned. He was the key person and principal investigator of one of the projects that brought in agroecology at Uganda Matters University. He was the very first dean of the Faculty of Agriculture and came up with a number of programs that have given rise to a number of other programs at Uganda Matters University. Currently, he's the regional chair of ecological organic agriculture and a member of the Continental Steering Committee of ecological organic agriculture. He brings in a lot of experience, over 30 years of experience in organic agriculture and ecological organic agriculture. He's a farmer, he's a trainer, he's all along the value chain in ecological organic agriculture. Professor Sechewa is an inevitable in organic agriculture and ecological organic agriculture, and that is why he's here with us today. Professor Sechewa, are you hearing us? Well, I'm sorry, it appears Professor Sechewa has gone off, but he has sent his presentation. And if members, you could allow me, I could rush through the presentation so that we don't lose the ideas which he has presented to us. If he joins us along the way, then I'll let him take over. His presentation is not a very long one. It had an introduction, and I think it could be presented to us. I'll just rush through. Next. So that is his presentation. And he has an outline. I'll not go through the outline, it is there. So let's go to the introduction. And he talks of a very complex ecosystem, which we all know. And he said in Uganda, land under agriculture ranges from agriculture ranges from 18.9 in that year, and 71.89 in 2016, as reported by the World Bank, 2020. It is constituted of living and non-living things, micro and microorganisms, plants and animals, as well as conditions around them. Each of these has factors in favor and those against its survival. Each of these, especially living things, aim at getting the best condition for its survival. As each organism struggles to achieve the best, it causes new circumstances which affect other organisms positively or negatively. So that is his introduction. And in the end, he says that in turn, the environment, social, economic sustainability of the agroecosystem is affected. He talks about geographical variability and suspected benefits. The world is divided horizontally and vertically. And in this slide, he talks about geographical variability in terms of wetlands, dry conditions, different rain schedules, different water bodies, altitudes, agroecosystems, and all these are different. So there is quite a lot of geographical variability, which is actually important in agroecology. And it talks of COVID-19 virus is reported to survive best in cold conditions and not high temperature conditions. And that could be a factor why some areas are affected by COVID-19 more than others or less than others. Next slide. He talks of biological complexity and its value among the pandemic. And in this case, he talks about biological entities, different biological entities, which are of course different in different areas, which brings in complexity. And he says it is suspected that there may be variation among human races by age, with Black people less susceptible than their white counterparts, and old people more vulnerable than the youth. And that all this biological variability in the ecosystem has been different. It affects, whether it has different effects on the severity and the spread of the disease, with varying economic importance, sustainability of the agroecosystem. So here he stresses biological complexity in relation to the pandemic. Next slide. In this slide, he talks about socioeconomic variation and the importance to agroecosystems. Of course, there are different social systems, socioeconomic systems in different parts of the world. And while he says that the COVID-19 pandemic is cosmopolitan, and with the developed countries are more affected, maybe that could be a socio-economic issue, but this of course needs to be discussed. He talks about that with less movement, people have reported more to feeding on their home produced food or to food items that have longer shelf life and are more affordable. Here he's agreeing with our friend from Rwanda, where people are producing food at home. And he insists on a longer shelf life food, which can easily be kept, and therefore people can survive on it longer. And in his last bullet, he says that this has far-reaching consequences, ensuring sustainability of the agroecosystem. Actors may not afford sustained future production of agricultural products, leave alone the fact that the influx into agriculture and with inadequate farming skills shall have negative impacts on the quality of products, soil degradation, and overall drop in conservation of agroecosystems, hence loss of sustainability. So he's talking about loss of sustainability, which could also be as a result of the effect of COVID. And in the next slide, he's talking about political ideology and variation in responding to COVID-19. Of course, politics is a big factor, as he has said, in influencing complexity and dynamism within the agroecosystems. And in one of the bullets, he talks about Uganda, which is more capitalistic and than socialistic, where the opposite is true for Tanzania. I don't know where Kenya stands. And this variation in ideology and handling of the pandemic caused varying spread as well as subsequent effects of COVID-19 on the country agroecosystem sustainability. So maybe we see politics playing quite a lot in the response to COVID-19. And then he talks about the cultural diversity and response to COVID-19. Of course, different cultures do different things, prefer different types of food, have different habits, and therefore we see culture being a factor in the spread of COVID-19, since some cultures, people tend to be a bit sedentary, others are more mobile, and therefore it affects the spread of COVID-19. And this way, sustainability of agroecosystems may be affected. In the next slide, he gives his conclusions and recommendations. And may I read these ones in particular? That COVID-19 has no boundaries within the complex agroecosystem. That's his conclusion number one. That the complexity of agroecosystems give us a wide range of options for adaptation and the mitigation of the COVID-19 disease. And thirdly, the agroecosystem, as complex as it is taken for granted, it requires its own customized soaps beyond general ones for its sustainability. That's a very important point, that this requires its own soaps. And he says in case of Uganda, there might not be any appropriate representative of the agroecological actors on the COVID-19 task force as of now. I think that is true. We need a representative on that committee, on the task force, because what agroecologists do may be a bit different from what other people do. And agroecosystems actors have capacity to analyze the complexity of their agroecosystems and come up with the most appropriate standard operating procedures that will ensure its sustainability. And he says this should be in line with recommended SOPs by Ministry of Health across countries. And lastly, he gives his recommended agroecological SOPs for sustainability of agroecosystems. And this is quite interesting. We've known the SOPs of wash your hands and put on a mask if you're in public, so forth and so forth. Charles gives his recommendation on the SOPs for sustainability of agroecosystems. And can I go through them? I think this is quite very interesting. Farmers, traders, and processors should keep social distance from everybody from out of their working system. That farmers, traders, and processors should put on masks whenever in contact with anyone outside or customers. While transforming goods, farmers, traders, and processors should put on masks and ensure social distancing. Every workplace should have foot-operated hand washing facilities by the entrance and behind in case of neighbors who come from various directions. And hand washing should be preferred to sanitizers in case of food handling. I think that is very important because some of the sanitizers maybe could be poisonous. So let's take that very, very seriously. When you're handling food, hand washing is more important and it should be taken cardinal instead of using sanitizers. Borrowing of farm tools from neighbors should be done after washing them with soap. That is very important because even the implements, the tools, can transmit different diseases. Extension workers or any other visitors to the farm supply shop or factory should observe social distancing and put on masks. That is true. In keeping animals, going to work on animals should involve wearing a mask to avoid sneezing into them, since we are not sure that they would not be infected by COVID-19. That is very, very important. I think there is even a research to show that human beings have transmitted COVID-19 to some animals. On purchase of an input or other items, immediately after handling and storing them, the operator should wash hands with soap. That is good care. The next one is avoid sending members of the operation, around without proper protection measures. Next is in the case of a factory or farm supply shop, have a controlled food system which observes social distancing and checks customers for COVID-19 symptoms such as temperature. That is important. The temperature gun should be everywhere. Encourage workers to comply with Ministry of Health SOPs while off farm and back to their homes. This is quite very, very important. The SOPs should be followed everywhere in different places. Produce a variety of nutritious foods and plants. Feed your family on them or use them against COVID-19. That's a very important recommendation, since we do not have a medicine as yet, and there is no vaccine. The cure is still our body's strength, which is provided by food and sometimes herbs. Some of us believe in agroecological herbs, and they may be doing a wonderful job. Ensure ethical behavior at all times by caring for the health of others as you care for your own health. Yes, this goes back to the Bible, where it says you love your neighbor as you love yourself. So ensure ethical behavior for everyone. And he says, be vigilant to report any member in the community with suspected COVID-19 symptom or running activities such as bars that might bring COVID-19 into your community agroecosystems. This is very important. Vigilance is very important. There is a need to do community policing to ensure that we are policemen of each other and we keep vigilance about people who are going to spread the disease in different areas. So these are recommendations from Charles Sechewa as far as agroecological SOPs are concerned to bring about sustainability in the agroecosystem. So I've tried to summarize Charles Sechewa's presentation. Of course, not as he would have done it, but that is what I could pick out of it. And I believe it is a very pregnant presentation, especially those SOPs and recommendations which he has put across. I thank you for listening to that presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, we are still on program. We still have some 8 minutes to go. We are a bit late. I will request that we borrow some 20 minutes so that we can complete our program. And we were still waiting for our 2 speakers, one from Kenya, one from Tanzania. If they are with us, may I request that they show up so that they can quickly summarize their presentations. Madam Elizabeth Njimol, are you with us? Madam Flexis, Are you with us? Okay, if these people are not with us, then we shall go to the next session, which is the QA, or the question and answer session. And we shall be using two methods. We have only 15 minutes for this. We shall be using two methods. One is you could raise your hand, and my fellow convener will pick your question. Or I have seen many people have sent questions. We shall read them, and we shall request our panelists, our speakers, now to be online to answer this question. So we have 15 minutes, and we shall first take the first 5 questions, and then we shall request our panelists to answer them. I thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Semakula.
Thank you very much, convener. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes, we can.
We can hear you.
We've had a set of questions and discussions. The first request went to Dr. Kakuru to share a link. This was from Sarah Mayanja, and Dr. Kakuru has shared this link. But the convener notified you that we are going to have all these issues compiled and sent to you. The second question came from Richard Ouma, and this was directed to Jean-Marie Irakabaho. I'm going to read all the questions and then we can respond. The question was, what agroecological practices are being emphasized to mitigate agriculture-related challenges during COVID-19 and after in Rwanda? That was one. Then from Natkunda, I think this goes to Dr. Kakuru. Is there any data globally showing how much food is consumed on a daily basis? Then we had a notification that we can have videos of agroecological practices from accessagriculture.com, accessagriculture.com. Then we had some kind of profound inner thinking from Dr. Sekandi. He was asking, how do you deal with food production externalities? This is food for thought for everyone to think. Then we had a question from Mr. Henry Mulindwa. I think this was directed to everybody, but he singled out Uganda Matters University, whether we were aware of a rice farm that is close to the university. And I don't know if he had a particular question related to this farm, or whether he was just confirming that it's not in line with agroecological principles and practice, or whether he was confirming that it is in line with agroecological practice and principles. So we can first have these ones answered. Dr. Kakuru, is there a database globally showing how much food is consumed on a daily basis? Maybe you can give some insights on this.
Thank you very much, moderator, for that question from Natkunda. I would like to first inform the people. There was a question on the link to the youth publication, FAO publication on COVID response. There are a number of other policy briefs in addition to that one on youth, and I sent a link in the chat box. Those who may not have read it, just scroll through the chat box. You'll find the link which I shared, and through that one, you'll get more information. For Natkunda's question, I would like to refer to her that, I hope it is her, FAO, working with different governments in the world and other stakeholders, normally produces periodic reports on different aspects related to food security, The most recent of 2020 is State of Food and Nutrition. So by checking on FAO website, which is www.fao.org, you'll get some exciting data which most people may not be aware exists. And through that same link, you read through a series of periodic reports on aspects of food and nutrition security. And by some other coincidence, FAO has the mandate of managing forestry under the UN system. You'll also find the state of forest, for example, in different parts of the world, in different continents and the world. So that data is freely available, and I am sure by extrapolating or unpacking it, you can get the kind of information you'd want to have, Natkunda. I hope that's a clear response to that. Otherwise, I thank different presenters of the panelists for the compliments. I'm glad a lot was echoed on what I shared, and I feel we are there and we are available for detailed discussion beyond today's session. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Kakuru, before you go, we have a question, like food for thought. I don't know if you can comment on it from Dr. Sekandi. How can we deal with food production externalities? From your experience with FAO, and to Natkunda, I will also add from what Dr. Kakuru has said, FAO has got the FAO Stat website, which is visited by over 20,000 people every day. So if you could go there, I think you can get some statistics. This is in addition to what Dr. Kakuru has said. Dr. Kakuru, can you help us with some thoughts on that? How to deal with food production externalities, if you can?
Yes, thank you. Very good one. Again, food production externalities. It goes back to today's theme of the value chain, because when you talk of food, most often we zero on one segment or node of the value chain depending on somebody's interest. I remember I shared a quick summary of the value chain on the food system. So I feel by unpacking the food production nodes, there are different externalities, which I'm sure by revisiting how traditionally they have been handled and the current approaches, and in particular, basing on the agroecology principles, we can come with appropriate ways of managing those externalities depending on different factors, one being location and the actors you are addressing and the part or the node of the food production or systems value chain. So I wouldn't say there is a one size fits all answer to that. It will depend on different factors, as long as you revisit which part of the value chain you want to analyze. There, I would say, a big menu of how to manage the externalities. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that wonderful insight, Dr. Kakuru. The next question was directed to Jean-Marie Irakabaho from Rwanda. Are there any practices that have been emphasized in Rwanda to mitigate agriculture-related challenges during COVID-19 and after? Jean-Marie, are you online?
Yes, I am, but you were speaking quickly. I didn't hear well.
The question was from Omar Richard. What agroecological practices are being emphasized in Rwanda to help deal with agriculture-related challenges during COVID-19? And are these sustainable? That was the question. Any practices that have been emphasized in Rwanda during this COVID-19 period for some challenges?
Yes, depending on the crop, we had been emphasizing on agroecological practices which are not requiring or which are helping us to minimize dependence from outside input. This I can do like using the worm tea. This means the liquid fertilizer produced by earthworms to spray on crop for foliar feeding, and also acting as an insect repellent. And the other is to sensitize farmers on composting, as they had been observing delays in agrochemical input supply. So the question is about not easy to capture or to not so specific, is wider, but it had been many interventions to sensitize farmers, producers to value local produced input in terms of pesticide, indigenous, like a foliar feeding, even from tephrosia, and also to improve the method of composting so that they can have enough organ fertilizer on land.
Okay, thank you very much, Jean-Marie. I think you heard about it. You can notice from the accent that Jean-Marie is Francophone, but he's communicated so well about the question. And Dr. Sekandi, do you want to comment? Some two people commented on the Luera farm rice that is close to Umu. Yeah, you are the captain of the faculty. Would you like to comment on that?
Unfortunately, coming from a conservation background, I have not interested myself with such large-scale productions. I don't have any information on the nature and what were the preparations that were done before establishing the farm. But the questions I was raising is whether there was actually a clear boundaries that were made, and also maybe models that were developed to understand the long-term impact this will have perhaps on the breeding of the tilapia that emerges out of Lake Victoria, on the water quality, and also the water that is available to local farmers, because we are going into, with all this climate change, there's going to be a lot of demand for fresh water for our own farming systems. So I don't know whether there were any considerations that were done, but I use the Luera farm really as an example to mean a larger scale production systems that are being promoted.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sekandi. I think members you've had is inferred the system where agroecology borrows its tenets. It must be a system. Can we have Professor Mwine to comment on that further?
Thank you, Doctor. I really don't have a lot of comment except that as a Center of Excellence in Agroecology, we are getting interested because this farm is very close to where we are located. And we are thinking of identifying a student we want to approach in that aspect by getting a student who will go there and try to do some work with that farm, such that we can know what exactly is happening. Times and again, approaches are very, very important. Some farmers may be a bit closed and they may not want to release certain secrets of what they are doing. And sometimes there would be some political internalities. So what we want to do is to get one student who can approach this farm and do some work with them to find exactly whether what they are doing is very practical as far as conservation is concerned, but also as far as agroecological practices and principles are concerned. We yet do not have any information regarding to what liabilities and other disadvantages that could be there on the farm. But with such large scale farms, of course, many things are likely to happen. So we promise to make some investigation, some research on that farm to establish whether it should be a very good neighbor of a farm, or rather if it is a good neighbor of a farm, or we could also come in and try to educate them on what should be done in order for that farm to be climate friendly, to be friendly to the environment, and also not to overexploit the resources around that swamp. I think that's the little I can comment.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Moderator, can I give a quick comment on Ruera?
Dr. Kakuru, you want to intervene? You want to share something, some insight?
Just in a minute on Ruera.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And I've been provoked to talk about this because of our topic of today of agroecology, where our interest is food production and productivity, but caring about the ecosystem where we produce the food, or where back to the externalities, whatever comes out of the process affects others. RERA is an upper catchment of one of the international Ramsar sites. Ramsar sites are wetlands of important ecological sites called Lake Nabugabo Ramsar site, which is one of Uganda's 12 Ramsar sites in terms of wetlands of ecological importance. All that comes out of whether agrochemicals that come from Ruera flows down to the Nabugabo. Nabugabo, if I tell you a story, is one of the satellite lakes, which is believed to have been part of Lake Victoria. When the Nile perch was introduced in Lake Victoria, the fish that was exterminated by Nile perch are in Lake Nabugabo. So as well back as 2-3 years ago, the wetland program, recognizing the importance, looked at the catchment area of that Lake Nabugabo Ramsar site ecosystem. And our quick observation was when that project was starting, we made some alarm bells, which were silenced, of course, the way you know. But there is a conservation investment plan, which is online, prepared by USAID project called Prepared, which shows the we have from that rice irrigation in terms of a downstream ecosystem called Lake Nabugabo Ramsar site. With poor management, one, it will affect what I call a museum of the fish species that we don't have, that were exterminated in Lake Victoria and in Nabugabo site. And I bet with poor management, whatever comes out of that scheme will go to Lake Victoria and cause unreversible effects. So I stand to be quoted, but if you want information, link up with Wetland Management Department in the Ministry of Water and Environment. You get that conservation investment plan. It will give you a background on detailed studies that were done, ecological studies that show how important that ecosystem is and what impacts likely to have by poor management. End of my story. I'm sorry about that. But I feel such a sensitive ecosystem that needs particular attention in the context of agroecology. Thank you.
Dr. Semakula, you can't be heard.
Okay. Mr. Richard Ouma, your hand has been up. Are you available?
Yes, can you
Please
hear me?
ask.
I have two questions.
Yes, please.
And the first one I think could go to Dr. Kakuru. I want to look at it from the institutional point of view. I work with Uganda Matters University. Now, if we are to develop a food security and risk management system for sustainable agroecological practices as a university, what specific areas would you advise us to focus on? Then my second question goes to my colleague, Dr. Sekandi. There's somewhere you talked about that the focus now should be on the local market. I slightly didn't get you very well. How sustainable would these local markets be? Because I'm looking at if we are producing the same items and we're encouraging productivity, and you're saying we should emphasize more now on the local market. Would it be sustainable? Possibly you would throw more light on that. I submit, moderator.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Ouma. I think these are very broad questions, and we're going to give the respondents time to answer them. And in the interest of time, the rest of the people, please, can you send your questions by chat, and we shall have them answered. For this, Dr. Kakuru, please, you're welcome to answer the first question.
The actual question come.
Doctor? Has he muted?
Oh, yes. Thank you, moderator, for that. I wanted to again refer our brother, that's a good question he asked, how we can move forward.
Maybe send him a message.
Oh, sorry, it seems I was not muted. I was saying I appreciate the question from the person who asked on what focal areas we should prioritize when developing a food security and risk management systems. And I wanted to comment, a quick comment, without committing the institution I work for or I represent. I find that as a very brilliant idea. I'm glad that the Matters University has some good partnership now with FAO. I would encourage that you look at that as one priority area that you can bring forth, especially given that you are the pioneers and trailblazers of agroecology. And I would say we'll discuss together on that. You try to write a quick message to FAO office, and I'm sure that's one area that will pique interest. Bring the academia and researchers to look at how we can have a food security and risk management system. It's feasible. But in terms of which areas we would focus on, of course, I would want to refer you again to, I said, the most recent freely available online document. There is one which I can abbreviate as SOFI, SOFI. SOFI would do, if you use the quick summary of what it is a state of food security that report that which are periodic reports that FAO releases. And this recent one is for 2020. And by reading through, you really see which focal areas we can focus on. In the interest of time, we can discuss later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kakuru, for the opportunity. Uganda Matters will be at the FAO doors very soon to see how we can forge a way forward together in that area. Dr. Sekandi, for the second question.
Thank you, Dr. Oma, on that, on the question of local markets. I mean, what I'm talking about when I talk about local markets, I'm not talking about trade between, let's say, Kayabwe and Lukaya, but I'm talking about huge issues related to, there are changes on my screen. I don't know whether I'm heard. I think there's someone trying to change something. I'm talking about big issues related to food miles. I hope you are aware that large-scale mechanized production systems and subsidized food production systems elsewhere lowers the cost of food importation vis-a-vis local food production. So you'd find actually, I don't know whether you're familiar with, a few years ago, sugar imported from Brazil was actually cheaper than sugar produced by Kakira Sugar Works. And the same to do with rice production. The rice from Pakistan is actually more cheaper than the rice that is produced in Busembatia. So I'm actually talking about huge climate change issues, issues related to carbon emissions, issues related to actually the sovereignty of our farmers and the sovereignty of our food systems. So I'm actually, when I talk about trade, local trade, I'm trying to encourage local consumption of food produced in country or even in the region. I submit, Chair.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I think these discussions can go on and on, but we are going to leave our lines open for continued discussions. Mr. Nyeko, you had a question. If you can quickly ask your question and to who it is directed, and this should be our last question. Mr. Nyeko Ronald. Mr. Nyeko, unmute. Mr. Nyeko, you are still muted. Please unmute. Mr. Nyeko, it is shown that you're muted. You've muted again, Mr. Nyeko. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm a farmer from Uganda, from northern part of Uganda, especially Gulu. I'm a smallholder farmer under east of Uganda. My question would go to Dr. Kakuru in regards to conventional farming versus agroecology. When we talk of market, now when we are talking of export, we are importing, like for example, the first presenter talk of importing sugar from Brazil and rice. In our local area here, we are known for growing upland rice. Now, if a smallholder farmer is producing rice and somebody is importing from another country, now I feel in terms of marketing, a local small scale farmer might not reach the market because now people will prefer imported rice to the local rice. Secondly, in terms of large-scale farming versus agroecology, we have seen many farmers, the so-called large-scale farming, they use a lot of chemicals, of which for us small-scale farmers, we are advocating for agroecology and use of organic farming methods. I don't know how doctor can explain to me that I understand with the small-scale farmers. Thank you. I submit my case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nyeko. Dr. Kakuru, you're welcome. We may have a minute or two to summarize.
Thank you so much, moderator, and thank you to Mr. Ronald Reagan Nyeko. Oh, yes, that's a very good question, because when you talk about value chain analysis and value chain strengthening and involvement, a factor of what is called competitiveness comes in. Because at the end of the day, you want to earn an income from that produce. But what I wanted to bring forth, and thank, we missed one of our professors, there have been some initiatives to make sure they create a premium price for somebody who has sacrificed to avoid the conventional farming where we pump in agrochemicals compared to the agroecological produce. An example is Nogama. I think Nogama is popular for that. And there is another institution called Amfree. Amfree also deals in producing organic products and also exports directly. And I've interacted with Amfree. I find them good because they have brought what we would call outgrowers, where if you are growing pineapples and you can assure them you do them organically, Amfree is certified with more than 5 companies at international level, where you are sure that if you exported your organically produced products, you'll earn a premium price. But it comes with some aspects of certification, which they stand in for you because they do certification at international level and it's costly. And there are issues of traceability. You have to promise them that you are indeed doing what you want. And I believe the way forward is for institutions and for like the one we're having of agroecology, advocating for the different Amfrees which can sacrifice to certify at international level, help have that supply chains of organically produced products which can fetch for us premium prices and reward this farmer who moved away from the conventional pumping of agrochemicals to the agroecologically produced products. But I think it can work. I would encourage my friend to try to Google Amfree. That's one company which has work in northern Uganda, central Uganda, and southwestern Uganda, and they have a farm, 1,500 acre farm in Nakaseke, and they are doing good work. I told you they are certified with 5 international companies which import organically produced products. So the way forward is coming together as agroecological producers, trying to link up with actors who can help us access those premium prices, and I believe it can work for us and incentivize production using agroecological methods. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kakuru. There's a comment from Professor Sechi was saying that we should go beyond economic sustainability to cultural, environmental, and health sustainability. And before I hand over, I just want to tell you that in Uganda, we have an agroecological society, and the convener of this webinar, Professor Min, is the overseer of this society. So he maybe can mention briefly about it, but we should all be members of this society since we've come to discuss these issues that concern us and go beyond today. So I hand back the microphone to the convener. Professor Mine, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, co-convener. And I want to thank each and everyone who participated in this webinar, and especially for you who are still with us. I want to thank you very much. We've borrowed some 20 minutes, it's over, but we are closing soon. And as have been requested, yes, we have an African Agroecological Society, and this society is active. I happen to be one of the founders and still the chair. And very soon we shall share a link with you concerning registration, those of you who have not registered, so that we can continue sharing these wonderful aspects of agroecology. And I also like to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that this discussion can continue online. You can post your questions or your comments on acalise@umo.ac.ug, such that we can continue carrying out this discussion, because it's live, it's good, it's very, very important for all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to close, but before we close, I would like to mention that our next webinar will be on the 9th. And this webinar will be on training and research. And we shall be having a number of institutions, a number of researchers, bringing in what they are doing and what they have been able to achieve. Some from PhD groups, others from other researchers in different parts of the world. And this will put us to a square that research is being carried out, information is being brought to light, such that agroecology can talk with facts. Because one of the issues that has been a problem with organic agriculture and agroecology, sometimes there are no facts to rely upon. But research is going on, innovations are going on, and therefore in the next webinar, we shall be looking at all those innovations and researches that have been done. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think I'll be coming back after the closing remarks. I want to wholeheartedly thank you for giving us your time, for listening to us and to everything that has been spoken. I want to believe that everything has moved on well. And I want to thank the team at Uganda Matters University, headed by Mr. Wamema and Rosette Nalugo, and a very big team behind them who have been coordinating this webinar. And I want to thank my co-convener, Dr. Semakula, for the work well done. I thank you all, and I thank you each and every person who has put in his time to participate in this webinar. Before we close, we shall request our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic, our Professor Michael Mawa, who will give some closing word and tell us to go. But before we do that, we are very grateful to our keynote speaker, Dr. Kakuru, for the wonderful exposition and for representing the FAO representative very, very ably. And all other speakers, our farmers, our keynote speaker, rather our panelists, thank you very much. And we shall call you again because we still have 2 other webinars that we shall hold soon. So towards the end, may I request Professor Michael Mawa to give us a closing remark and close the session. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, moderator of this webinar. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to take this opportunity to say basically thank you to everyone for a webinar well organized and for the active participation throughout this process. I must confess that when I received the invitation, I wondered what can a lay person like me add value into a discussion of ecological issues. The word ecological sounded very big for me, but today it has been simplified to refer to the basic thing that I know every day and I think about every day, food. And as I say this word, I'm already thinking about food. Thank you for simplifying the entire discussion. The truth is that COVID-19 has impacted us very greatly. And food has been one of the areas that has been impacted so much, both in production, in the supply, and even in the consumption, as the keynote speaker ably illustrated. And I'm very pleased that food is also the remedy to this very problem. So I think we must now bring forward that the management, the response, the intervention to COVID must put food at the center of it all. Food for prevention and food for managing when persons have been infected by the virus. So we need to put this at the center of our discussion. One thing that one of the members in the chat room mentioned is that we spend a lot of time discussing and talking, and that we need to move beyond the boardroom discussion to actually cause an impact with the great ideas that we raise in such discussions. And I like that observation, and I like the call that have been made by members here that we need to become the advocates, not only in words, but also in action, to bring the change of sustainable ecological consideration in all that we do in our society. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't have really words to say, but I want to express my sincere thanks on behalf of Uganda Matters University Management for the keynote presenter, for accepting our invitation, and for being here all this time. We thank you very sincerely for your great input, for your great contribution in this webinar. I also want to thank all the panelists and the discussants who ably shared their thoughts, shared their experiences, and particularly the experiences of the farmers have been very, very significant in this discussion. We cannot talk about sustainable food security without really the voices of the farmers, the very people who are engaged in the production process of this food that we talk about. I also want to thank all the participants in Uganda, in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Rwanda, and other countries who have joined in this webinar for your active participation. I was silent, but I was following the chat room very closely, and I could see the amount of discussion, the ideas that were being generated, significant on this matter that we are discussing today. I want to thank you most sincerely. And finally, I want to thank the convener and all your team members for a work well done. Thank you very much. If I was physically within, I think the greatest gift I will give you would have been food. And you all deserve really a nice food for this afternoon. I don't want to take any longer time because it is now food time. I only want to wish all of you a good appetite. And since we have been advised food is a remedy to COVID-19, let's take this message forward and let's use it to fight COVID-19 and remain able to continue to support and serve society. I thank you very much and I wish you all the best. I am not entitled to close the seminar because we still have 2 other webinar sessions coming in, but for the purpose of this session, I would like to officially close the session and I wish you a good day. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Michael.
Thank you so much.
Michael.
We'll see you on the 9th.
Can we have a group photo, please?
Bye
Can
for
we
now.
have a group photo? Group photo? Group photo, please.
We are being advised to turn on our videos so that they can capture.
Yeah, we have a group photo.
Yes.
Yes, please turn on your videos so that we can have a group photo. And put on agroecological smiles.
Team is ready for a group photo, please.
Have you finished? Yeah?
The camera is on
Thank
break.
you very much. The photo is done.
Thank you very
See you on the
much.
9th.
Thank you. Thank you.